Just before you're mentioning that sometimes you get groups of people that haven't had too much exposure or not real like sort of craft beer people.
Yep.
How does that sort of come to be that they've come on the tour in the first place? Like, so are they just kind of been dragged along by someone, or?
It's a whole range of reasons. First of all, bucks parties.
Right.
So you might have 2 or 3 in a group of 10 that are into their
I think
beers.
there was a unicorn in one of those ones that just came through.
Yeah.
There's a photo of him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a photo floating around of that
we've
unicorn.
had leprechauns and all sorts of things. So that's part of it. And then gift cards is another thing. So I think experiences are becoming a big gifting item. And so whether it's Red Balloon or whether it's a gift card, and so, you might get somebody who's 20 and, like Jordy saying, I don't really know much about this. This is what I traditionally drink. And you go, cool. You're a blank slate, essentially. Yeah. And you get to start from the very beginning and talk them through lagers all the way to stouts and go through that whole rainbow of colors and the flavors and that spectrum of differences. But yeah, where do they come from? Yeah, a lot of bucks parties, which are great.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's another opportunity.
And you get 10 of them at once. And, it's, and people think, you poor things, you do bucks parties. And yeah, we've had a few go not great. But we, had one over the weekend and they were all a bit dusty and you kind of think, I don't know how this is going to go. And they asked some of the best questions all day of just really absorbing what we were saying, even as they're eating their lunch and you don't think they're paying attention. And then an hour later going, right, so you said this back there. So how does that translate into what we're drinking here? And you think, you're actually listening. This might have actually changed. And granted, they all went back to their hotel room and were drinking big beer because that's what was left. Yeah. But that's always, a really fun experience to see that there's no shame. I guess they don't feel like the unicorn when they're around all of their friends because they're not the only one at the pub that orders the fancy beer and all their mates are giving them a bit of a hard time. They're all kind of in it together. And so if they're all drinking the fancy beer, then nobody can really cop it. And so I think it's almost a safer environment to ask those questions as opposed to standing there being like, well, I reckon that the IBU on this could be a little bit higher, being a little bit of a beer wank.
Classic hipster.
It's so interesting though, because there's like this, there's craft beer people. We talk about that concept and crafty people and, beer enthusiasts and stuff like that. And there'll always be that group, but it's a very small group in a very large pond of people. And to me, it's how do you bring like the challenge and the opportunity, I guess, for us is bringing all of this great, unique, independent, fresh product to the 80, 90% of the people because they're exactly the same as the crafty people. They may not get as nerdy about it as some of us do.
Fine.
And that's fine.
They don't need to.
But just like the wine
people.
industry and all that sort of stuff, people open up their mind to things. Next thing you know, they're quite passionate about it. And they become, I'm a Goza person now, and I love Gozas because they're just, they float my boat.
I think it's just that initial introduction and that little bit of education. You don't need to tell them a massive kind of long story about the beer or anything like that. It's basically just hitting a few points and just getting them to actually try something. So like yourself, when I'm doing tastings in stores and things like that, the female population or even the males come in and you go, would you like to try a beer? And they're like, no, I'm just here for red wine. And you're just like, it's free beer. And they're like, oh, I guess I'll have a free beer. And then you're like, all right, sweet. Here, taste this, taste this, taste this. And, I don't really like beer. Okay, well, cool. Have a sour. Have this. Do you like these flavors and all this kind of stuff? And then they drink it and they go, wow. I'm grabbing a 4-pack of that and going home. And then you see it, and then actually you see it them posted on the social media saying, I found this at the bottle shop. Like, this is absolutely fantastic.
They're genuinely proud of that new knowledge.
And it's absolutely, like, I get off on educating people about stuff. So I think it's a fantastic thing to be able to give people.
And I think that's what Hop On's doing is like you're educating the new generation of beer drinkers. And that's a really special thing because there's not a lot of people doing that, right? Like outside the breweries that market in their own little circles and, general awareness, which is still quite small in the big scheme of things. So you look at the stats, big beer versus independent craft beer, totally skewed. But you guys are part of what's shaping the future of beer.
I think that's where we're really fortunate is we do bridge that gap. And so, like you said, outside of in-store tastings or actually going to the brewery, unless you are dedicated enough to sit down and do an online search or watch YouTube videos about beer or about that specific brewery, we can kind of take that. And everybody likes knowing something that their friends don't know, right? I mean, that's why people love bar trivia, because they can one up, oh yeah, well, I knew that. And so if you can give them even these little things, and look, after 6 hours, they might not remember everything that you've told them, which is fine. There's no test at the end. But if they can pick up one or two things that maybe they'll carry into their future purchases or next time they walk into, think, oh yeah, I had that other IPA and I remember that they said that it was like this or maybe like that. To bridge that gap, I think is really exciting for us to be able to do. And I think the other thing is just showing them not all pale ales are the same. Not all IPAs are the same. Not all stouts are the same. And I'm not just talking about big beer versus little beer. But if you take 6, and I think there's even an event coming up that's like 6 Brisbane pale ales that you can do side by side from 6 different breweries. I think that's fantastic.
It's really cool.
Because you get some that are much more malt driven and a little bit of that more, cereally sweetness, and some that are super hop bombs and so to say, oh, I don't like pale ales, well,
that's a broad brush.
Well, we always say, mainly when people go, I don't like IPAs, you go, all right, if I brought you a pizza and it had mushrooms and anchovies, and you don't like anchovies, are you going to swear off pizza? I go, well, no. Say, no, that's right. You're going to get pepperoni or you're going to get thick crust instead of thin crust. How many different toppings are there for pizzas? How many different hops do you have? How many different this?
It's big beer stigma, though. It's like, 95% of beer in Australia is the traditional lager. It's like, well, that's what you're up against. And that is a strong message. It's in our culture.
Definitely.
It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
Like people go, no, I don't like beer.
Yeah.
Because I've had, probably had several sips along the way in your life, and they've all been very similar sort of lagers. And you go, well, it's not my thing. So you've got to kind of crack that egg. And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Slightly just going back to the actual tours themselves and some of the type of crowds and things like that you've had. What is the best and worst tour that you've had?
I can't say best because
Revel Brewing.
Here.
Well, I'm standing right here, so that'd be a bit unfair. Honestly, because we've had so many just great tours, people that have really different hobbies and experiences that you get to spend all day not just sharing your knowledge, but people that have been that work with honeybees or that farm pineapples or do things that we had a guy who was studying some snail that lives on the bottom of a sea and studying their venom to help create cures for God knows what. I don't know. People that are way smarter than I was.
Into a beer.
Yeah. And then he harvested the snail.
I think, and look, the worst, of course we've got specific worst tours. I always say if you don't lick my van windows, then you're not the worst. We've had the window lickers.
Window licker.
They're not going to be listening to this podcast. I think that's pretty safe to say. They probably wouldn't remember even if they did.
I'd be pretty proud of it.
Wasn't one of you guys down on the tour, was it?
No.
Wasn't Geordie?
No,
I believe there was something other than alcohol involved while we were not looking, and it ended up with
the texture
people.
of this window is amazing.
Well, I actually turned around and I was like, are you 3? What are you doing right now?
Shouldn't be on my tour.
Nose pushed against the window, licking the van window. I was like, this is unbelievable. In general, the worst tours are the ones where people just are in it for the wrong reasons. Where people came on thinking it's going to be a pub crawl, thinking they're going to come back and just get wasted and they're going to smash 6 pints at each venue we go to, and for whatever reason have not even looked at our website and have no idea what they've signed up for. That's the hardest for us because we do want to share the information. We do want to educate. And when you get a group of people that clearly don't care, that's when you go, well, why didn't you just go throw $100 over the bar and do shots of Jack Daniels all day? You know what I mean? That's where it's tough.
Have you had a tour similar to that where they just go for the highest percentage beers at the bar straight away and they don't actually make it all the way through the tour?
No.
Oh.
Because we provide the samples on tour.
Oh, true. That's
right.
yes.
So we pick the beers that go on the tasting boards, and that's what you get. And we don't encourage people to buy extras. You get about 3 to 4 liters of beer on one of our full day tours, which even the biggest person who can smash a carton of, 3.5%, I can drink a 30 pack. Cool. I'm going to give you a 9.5% Russian Imperial Stout and see how you handle that. Having said that, there are always the people who try and sneak those extras, usually in large groups. We've had to cut one group short. And in all fairness, on our drive back into the city, it was like 2 tasting glasses short because they were buying 9.5% beers and making the person scull it, and that wasn't going down so well.
It's never going to end.
No, it was not. And in all fairness, on the drive back into the city, they were like, sorry, we shouldn't have done that. And we're like, yeah. No, you shouldn't have. Like, fair enough. And they owned up to it, and we dropped them off, and it was fine. They were really good guys. They were just caught up in the moment.
It's a very different, it definitely isn't a pub crawl.
No.
It's an information sort of session. It's about quality. It's not about the quantity. And I love, it's one of the things that really interests me when we first talked about the whole concept, because we didn't want to have Bucks parties coming through Revel because it's a very family inclusive environment. We didn't want an area full of really noisy, rowdy guys, yet we've had Bucks parties and things with you guys, and it's been really well organized. It's been really tight. Everyone's been very respectable. And it just mimics what we have here in our community. People come here and they go, I could smash like 15 summer ales, but I'm just going to have one Russian and a pale ale with my pizza and be just chilled, and then off I go.
Yeah.
And that's the experience we kind of have with Hop On, where people almost, maybe not that I want to get drunk, but they want to hold out and not be too silly because they want to go to the next one and experience that on its own, right? And actually be part of that rather than be wanting to miss out on it.
We really value our relationship with the breweries. We value our relationship with you guys. And if we had somebody off their chops and who was, causing a disturbance and just being a nuisance and swearing and cursing, and there were kids around, we don't want that, because we don't want to get the call. I don't want to look at my phone and see that Jay is calling me and we have to have a serious chat about bringing groups in, because we respect everybody far too much for that. And that's something that is, again, really lucky for us in that we have this scope and we know what breweries you can take people to if people are getting a little bit more rowdy versus the places that are a little bit more family oriented. And for us, it's fantastic knowing that, because the relationships are everything with us. Like, if we didn't have our relationships, or we somehow, you guys had that conversation after we left and they're like, I don't know about that group that Hop On brought in and maybe we need to have a chat with us. That would just break our hearts. So not only do we establish that pretty early on in the tour, but throughout the day, it's kind of like, cool, if you guys aren't going to like rein it in a little bit, we're going to just drop you at the pub. We're not going to take you somewhere else to drink their great beer.
And that hammers home the point of being a relationship, not a transactional sort of thing. And that's really important. It really is.